I thought I'd just make a short video just to cover off on one of the concepts that's floating around at the moment. So we see in the media that there's talk of house values dropping. One thing I would say from the outset is just be aware when you're reading these articles that often the media latch hold of, say, the worst case scenario that might have been quoted by an economist or a bank doing their research. The media grab the worst case scenario and run with that on the headlines. But I wanted to put a bit of a spin on it just to outline that for people who are actually in the circumstances where they might be upgrading properties, which I would say is probably most property transactions, once people tend to have a property that they're in, they tend to hold it for life. So most of the transactions tend to be upgrades of properties. So in a situation where there's actually a drop in overall market values, it actually can work quite well in favour of people who are upgrading properties. Now, that's provided the fall isn't so great that you're put in a position of negative equity. But I'll take you through this example here where I'll indicate that a price drop of, say, 15% might actually leave you better off in the long run. So what I've got here is an existing property value, say, pre-pandemic, or when the market was at its peak. As an example, the property was worth $1 million. And the example loan size I have against that property is $500,000. So keeping factors like real estate agent fees and any potential capital gains taxes and things like that out of it, just to keep it simple in round numbers, if you sold for $1 million and you had $500,000 of lending against that property, you would have net proceeds of sale of $500,000. So then we think, okay, if you've now got $500,000 savings and you're going to put that towards your next property that you're upgrading, let's say in the next example that you're going to upgrade to a property worth $1.5 million. So let's have a look at that. The new property value is 1.5. As we know, there are stamp duties and other costs related to purchasing a property. That would roughly, again, in round numbers, bring it up to something like 1.59. You then have your savings or your cash on hand, which was the proceeds from sale of your previous property. And approximately to settle the transaction of the new purchase, you would need to borrow around about $1,090,000. Now, the important thing also to notice here is that $1,090,000 over the life of a 30-year loan actually works out to total repayments based on 3% of just over 1.6. So let's have a look at that same set of circumstances, with the only difference being a reduction in the overall market value of around 10%. So the property that was worth $1 million has now decreased in value, and it's only worth $900,000. Gee, what a pity. Your loan size hasn't changed, of course, because the bank doesn't forgive any of your lending simply because the property has dropped in value. So you've got the property that's worth $900,000 and the same amount of lending. If you sold it in a market situation where the price has dropped 10%, instead of having $500,000, you've now only got $400,000, which initially, that seems bad. But then let's look at what impact that has, this 10% price drop, what impact that has on the property that you're purchasing. So the property that you were aiming to buy that was worth 1.5 would now actually be worth 1.35. Going through here without focusing line by line, you can see that the 1.35 property costs 1.43. You contribute your 400 that you netted on the sale of your first property. But here is the benefit. Your new loan is actually only $1,031,000, which is $59,000 less than what your loan would have been if you had purchased in the peak of the market. Now, that's a great outcome. You've borrowed $59,000 less for really the same property. But then add to that what that loan costs you over the term. Instead of costing 1.654, it costs you about 1.564, which is a total of around $90,000 better off. So you can see in a situation where if you're a property upgrader and the market drops by around 10%, you might actually find yourself in a circumstance where you're better off as a result of the market dropping. So just a little bit of a thing I thought I'd like to share, because I think understandably, when we do see things like property markets set to dive or headlines like that, it is alarming. And as property owners, it is something we have a vested interest in, but it's not always such a bad thing. Obviously, give us a ring or an email if you want to discuss any circumstances specifically, but hopefully this video has shed a bit of light.